Hello, and welcome to the Redfish Technology webinar, Closing Candidates, a How-To in a Hot Job Market. Part of the way we seek to share our professional insights is via original articles written by the Redfish recruiters, which you can find on our blogs and websites. A critical part of the job for the recruiters at Redfish is giving advice, both to job seekers and hiring managers. We are in the prospecting and hiring trenches every day, working with startups and larger established companies alike. A recent article on closing candidates garnered much dialogue and inspired us to create this webinar. Hopefully you can all hear us at this point. By default, you have joined audio using your computer speaker system. If you are dialing in, select Use Telephone in your audio pane and enter your unique audio PIN. We anticipate this webinar lasting about 20 minutes with time for Q&A afterwards. We will be recording this webinar so that you may consult it on our website in the future. You are invited to ask questions or make comments via the question dialog box. If we do not address your question during the presentation, we'll address them at the end during the Q&A. There will also be a couple of short polls to gauge how the hiring process is unfolding for you, the audience. We would appreciate your participation and will share the results in real time. The goal of this webinar is to help you understand how to ensure that your first choice candidates accept your job offers. Let me introduce to you now our high-tech sales and marketing talent manager, Joanna Edwards, and our clean tech talent manager, Greg Schreiner. Joanna Edwards is a DePaul University graduate where she obtained her degree in marketing. She began recruiting back in 2006 at Redfish. Joanna is passionate about recruiting and is tireless in her efforts to identify the best and brightest talent for her client companies, for whom she is a fearless advocate. Greg Schreiner has a Bachelor's of Science in Business Management. He has a rich work history, including 4 years as an air traffic controller in the military. He's owned his own company and worked in sales for many years. Greg has been recruiting since 2007, focusing exclusively on the green tech and alternative energy sectors. At this point, let me turn it over to Joanna and Greg, who will present the agenda and dive into the webinar. Thank you very much for your participation today.
Thanks so much, Anna, and to everyone attending, welcome again. So last month I was prompted to write this article because on multiple occasions I was asked by hiring managers, how do we even close this candidate? And it really brought up a very interesting question. What does it take to have the most probable and successful close when it comes to hiring a candidate? So we're going to give you our inside knowledge today, really what we're seeing and what it means for you in your next hire. And again, please feel free to shoot us some questions. We'll do our best to cover them at the end. Or if not, this webinar will follow up with our email addresses and we'll go ahead and send them to you directly. So introduction, you now know who Greg and I are, but again, I run our sales and marketing division for the high-tech side, and Greg runs our alternative energy division. We'll be covering market conditions just to give you an idea of what we're seeing. Knowledge is power, and really the more you know, the better off you are. Agility, focusing on flexibility once you have found the right candidate. Team incorporation, using C-level executives to help make the close. And lastly, negotiation, how to do it and what to remember. So market conditions. Given the title of the webinar, it's obvious that we're seeing things heat up on our end. But how do we know? Two primary examples of this, I would say, when speaking with a candidate last week who declared he was actively looking for a new role. Since beginning his career search that same very week, he had already received 152 emails regarding job opportunities. Or this week, I'm working with a candidate that I recruited directly out of his current organization, and he has 3 other job offers, not including mine. So again, these are just 2 examples. I will say, despite what the press has to say about floundering job statistics, personally, I'll tell you that we're seeing a dramatic increase in new job opportunities on our end. And what we've got to remember is that with a positive increase in economy comes a new set of challenges that the hiring manager must be prepared to combat. Also, another thing to note, that practicing closing candidates is just a good strategy overall in any given market, especially given the time, the effort, and the costs involved of hiring. So we'll come back to this in a second, but I want to launch a quick poll entitled Cost of Hiring. So if you take the next 15 seconds just to give us your initial gut feeling to the average cost of hiring a new person. We'll review these results in a second. But while answering this question, really think of the time involved in the new hire, the recruiting costs or the HR fees involved, the advertising of the position, the travel, the potential relocation involved. These are all things that must be considered. So it looks like people are closing up, and there's a variety of answers. A lot of you had answered 100% of annual salary, which I think is a great stab at it. I would say the best answer is 1.5 to 3 times the annual salary, so somewhere in between the second and third answer. Now this reflects the cost of a bad hire, which is what we're trying to eliminate, partly in this webinar, but overall in our career paths. If the candidate does not accept your offer, you've just spent a lot of time and money, not to mention either the project is delayed or the sales not being made. Clients are left without maybe the help that you promised. Whatever the situation, hopefully we can help provide a couple ideas to ensure that right hire.
That's a great point, Joanna, and the cost of hiring can be really detrimental to a company, and that's why, knowledge is power. May sound obvious, but the best way to close a candidate is to have as much information as possible, and this really starts from the minute you first look at their resume. After you decide you're interested in having a conversation or an interview with a candidate, you begin to ask the right questions. Here's a list of some of the questions that we'll typically ask a candidate once at the beginning of the process and again through the interview process as it continues. Are they interviewing anywhere else? If so, how far along are they in that process? Knowing this will give you a rough estimate of their time frame. If they're actively interviewing and heading towards final stages, you really need to get the interview process started immediately. This may entail moving scheduled trips or having impromptu meetings at an airport, coffee meetings outside of the office, rearranging your team's routine, maybe even skipping the initial phone call and bringing them directly on site. In doing so, you have a chance to evaluate the candidate before they have multiple offers. Also, you can ensure that they're qualified as the resume reads and a good cultural fit for the organization. If they are interviewing, do they have any other offers? And if so, what numbers did they come in at? It's a great follow-up question to ask if, after you asked if they're interviewing anywhere else, especially if you're nearing the end of the interview process with that candidate. Especially in a hot market, companies have to get creative when closing candidates. They may have to decide if there's more, if they have to have wiggle room in the offer, whether that's, base salary, on-target earnings, equity, whatever the motivation of the candidate may be. If they're not currently hiring or don't have an offer, where are they at currently? What is their current salary? That may include base, their total W-2 or compensation, projected earnings for 2011, or as we near the end of this year, what the projected earnings are for 2012. But there's other components that may not be included in that, like car allowance, phone allowances, pay time off, flex spending accounts, just your typical benefits. So inquiring about those salary requirements often determines if a candidate is the right fit for the role, if they're within that slated range that you have ideally picked for this whatever particular role it may be. But if they're out of that allotted price range, you know what you're up against. You can pull from other parts of the budget to make this candidate work. If there's, out of that price range, we can try to figure out what really motivates that candidate. If they're looking for ownership in the company, potentially you can provide a smaller base for a larger return in an equity play. If they're looking for maybe an uncapped earnings or a better upside than they currently have, maybe again a lower base will work if you can reevaluate their on-target earnings, or a very aggressive bonus structure. If we can't quite get there with that, maybe there's an option to do like a sign-on bonus. You can structure it to pay that throughout the year, require them to pay it back if they leave. There's a lot of strength in putting that into an offer. It really makes that employee want to stick around. One critical question that's often overlooked is when they can start. This is equally as important because as the salary, especially if there's a large project on the horizon or deliverables that need to be going out the door and this person's ultimately going to be in charge of those deliverables. Typically a candidate likes to give a minimum of a 2-week notice to their current employers, but sometimes this period, this period can be shorter or longer just based on current projects they're working on. So that's a really important question to be involved with.
Perfect. And really, the more you know, the better, especially in these situations. In our next slide, agility. And I kind of laugh about this one because what it should really say is in bold letters, be prepared to change your interview process. I understand companies put processes in order to provide a predictable environment. And that's even something that we do here at Redfish. It acts as quality assurance, which is completely understandable, but it needs to be subject to change, really depending on schedules. Candidates maybe have multiple offers, even something like weather or holidays. Right now, I would say the most typical interview process that we see consists of a first-round phone screen. If that goes well, bringing the candidate on for an on-site meeting with multiple hiring managers. This could be an hour or two. It could even be a full day. And if that goes well, then go ahead and start the reference checks and then make a decision. From start to completion, this process is averaging about 2 weeks, though, right now we're closing a deal that's gone on about 3.5, or there was one that lasted 8 days last week. However, if you find a candidate that you really like, what you've got to remember is that odds are someone else really likes their ability to sell, or maybe it's their ability to design or to write. Whatever the case is, this means that you've got to be sort of willing to change your interview process. This may mean skipping an initial phone call as a way to save time. Or once you've gone through the process, maybe making an offer contingent on references versus completing them and then making an offer. Again, be prepared to adapt your process if the candidate's moving towards another offer. If we're approaching a holiday, if a required interviewer is going to be on vacation, just remember, if you want this person, be prepared to move some things around. The saying, as cliche as it may sound, time kills all deals, not only applies to sales, but it also applies in the hiring world, very much so.
Joanna, that's a great point. And also in the hiring process, incorporating the team is really critical, and I think there needs to be some agility and flexibility there. But what we ultimately want to do is, bring the team into the dialogue, involve all the decision makers in that process, and really play on the company culture and sell the company culture. And really what this does is it shows the motivation of the team, and it demonstrates the team environment of the company or the company culture. And this is extremely important for candidates as they evaluate potential employers. They want to make sure it's going to be a good fit for both the employer and for them walking in the door. It also allows different level of employees to answer candidate questions from peers, managers, C-level folks. They're going to provide different perspectives to that candidate, really allow them to gauge what their different perspectives are for the role, the responsibilities for the role, and how the team culture fits within each different hierarchy of the company. And one thing that we really like to encourage to our clients is, if possible, invite the candidate to a corporate event or a meeting that they would typically be involved in if they were actually an employee or if they came on board. Again, this is really playing on the company culture. It allows us to see them the daily interactions of the company. During the interview process, if the candidate was able to meet multiple managers, incorporate those managers in the presentation of the offer. Have the CEO call or the hiring manager call them directly, invite them to join the team or extend the offer to them directly. There's a lot of strength sitting across from the table from a candidate, shaking their hand and letting them know that you want them on board. There's a lot of different functionalities within the company, like HR, internal recruitment, that a lot of clients will have extend offers. But one of the issues is candidates sometimes have questions immediately, whether it's about compensation, paid time off, or whatever it may be, that a hiring manager can often deflect or answer directly, where as an HR function or an internal recruiter, they'll have to go back to the hiring manager or the CFO or CEO and ask those questions, so that can actually delay the process. And I think the big piece on this is making sure during this entire process that the team is all on the same page as far as how we want to sell the company and how we want to sell the opportunity.
And a big part of that is playing on company culture. And again, sell the opportunity. And sure, it seems very obvious, but I think oftentimes what hiring managers forget the most and what recruiters end up doing is selling the role, selling the company, selling sort of what they're going to be doing. Initially, the candidate needs to sell themselves and sell their ability, but at the end of the process, it's just the opposite. The candidate needs to hear why they should work for your organization. You want them to make sure they understand what your organization makes it tick, or what the company's 5- and 10-year goals are, where the candidate should expect to see themselves in 3 years, or why you choose to work there. Everyone has a decision, but you're working for the company, and it's crucial that the candidate understands why. Especially if you're in a multiple offer situation, you need to differentiate your company and why you and your offer are better than the other one. which goes back to knowledge is power. The more you know, the better off you are, so you can provide concrete examples of why this opportunity is better. And also remember that there is more than just salary, and I cannot stress this enough. Some candidates are motivated by title, others are motivated by equity, some are motivated by company perks. Maybe you guys have free corporate Cubs tickets or free lunch Fridays, or maybe you allow your employees to telecommute a couple days a week. Whatever it may be, make it work to your advantage. And remember, do this with the energy and the passion and the synergy that you feel. Truly, once a candidate feels that connection and that energy, it's much more difficult for them to pass up the offer, even if salary is a bit off.
Well, at the end of the day, obviously we want to get an offer out to the candidate, and this is where we need to be ready to negotiate. As part of extending the offer, we want it to be a win-win situation, beneficial for both the company and the candidate. And Joanna brought up a lot of good points of what to cover during this negotiation piece, and selling the company, selling the culture, selling the opportunity is probably most crucial at this point when you're trying to close a candidate. So once the interview process is complete and you've decided your ideal candidate has finally arrived, be prepared to negotiate, particularly in this market and as it continues to get hotter. Knowing what motivates that person is crucial for a successful and mutual beneficial negotiation. Oftentimes, making a move comes down to salary or equity, but as Joanna mentioned, there's a lot of other factors that make a huge difference, whether it's PTO, flex hours, telecommuting, the benefits package, 401k, whatever it may be. Really sell those opportunities and the bonuses associated with that. Again, going back to the involving the team piece, I can't stress enough how much strength there is in having the hiring manager or the CEO extend the offer directly. That really shows the candidate that the company is really motivated to bring them on board. It also allows for those questions to be answered on the spot. And so just for a recap, as always, it's important to know the market, especially as the current market continues to shrink and the candidate pool continues to shrink. Know the candidate's motivation early in the process, have that agility or flexibility in your hiring process and be able to streamline it. Involve all the decision makers, that conveys the company culture. It allows everybody to meet the candidate and decide on the right hire, and be ready to extend the offer quickly and have the hiring manager or the CEO present the offer directly. And throughout this process, always sell the company and the opportunity. Now we're going to move into some question and answers. Looks like we're getting quite a few coming in, so we'll try to answer these as many as possible.
All right, so let's see. I guess first, thank you guys very much for attending. I know a lot of you already work with Redfish, and some of you are new to us, but regardless, I hope this webinar was helpful and provided insight into what we're seeing on a daily basis. Again, we'll follow up with our email addresses, but please send any other questions you may have. It looks like we've got quite a few. I think we'll be able to answer a couple, and it looks like Bill said, why should I use a recruiter? They seem expensive for a job I can do on my own. Good question, Bill, and it's something that I'm asked a lot. So my first response is always when speaking with hiring managers, it's not your job. Sure, it may be a functionality. You are responsible directly for hiring and firing your employees. I understand, but I've dedicated, my entire career to helping people find jobs that they're passionate about and really being that corporate matchmaker. So my entire days are spent finding and talking to candidates, networking through hiring managers or networking through candidates. I try to study the job market is the best of my ability to make sure I'm staying ahead of trends and I can best prepare my client companies. This comes a lot through trial and error, but through research, I now know what to ask candidates, how to close them, talking about this webinar, giving inside advice. And also you've got to remember that recruiters are here to save you time. We're the ones that are going out and finding these difficult to reach candidates. We're doing a pre-screen with them to make sure we know what they're looking for, asking them some of these difficult questions. So we're able to provide you with that information. And if you do choose to use a recruiter, I always recommend do your research. It's a big decision. Hopefully that recruiter will be with you for a number of years throughout your career. So find one that you trust or that comes recommended, I think is my best advice when it comes to that.
Well, it looks like we got a question from Jim, who's actually one of my hiring managers and clients that I work with up in New Jersey, a solar integrator company. They're a great company, so thanks for attending, Jim. Asking, are you seeing an increase in salaries over the last 6 months to a year? And that's a great question. I would say in general we've seen a 10 to 15% increase in the last year to year and a half. But really every position is going to be very independent of each other. And we're a great resource on what we're seeing in the market. We'll definitely share that with you. If you have a really strong internal recruitment or HR department, they can answer a lot of those questions as well. But I think there are some tremendous values out there still for candidates that are looking to transition into high tech or green tech that have solid and applicable experiences. And just for example, with Jim's company, solar integrator, I work with a number of solar integrators throughout the U.S. and one of the things that I always try to suggest is having some flexibility in that background. If they don't have solar project management experience per se, for example, but they've managed large civil or infrastructure projects, in that large, 25 million range, whatever. Those are very complex projects, and many times they can translate very easily into a solar PM. But that person may be really looking to get in and be motivated to get into green, so maybe a great way to get a really good value on somebody. And that's really where we can be leveraged as a recruiting firm. Let's see what else we have here.
It looks like Charlie, if a candidate has multiple offers, how would you go about leveraging your client over others? And again, these are really good questions and something we're seeing a lot of, especially in today's market. It depends, I think, is the best answer, and it really depends what you can offer against the other offers. Is it you've got a higher salary, or if this is a sales role, do you have a higher on-target earning? Is it a more realistic earning? Is there equity that's a big part of this? Does the hiring manager and the company have tenure with their roles? Have they been there for 10 plus years? Is there a really solid exit strategy in place? I think that those are all important things, and it really goes back to know as much as you can possibly know. Is your candidate or your potential new employee looking because they recently had a baby and the commute has become too long? Well, if that's the case and you can offer telecommuting, that may be a step above, even if salary is comparable. So it's really going to depend on what you know and leveraging that information to help make a successful close.
Well, it looks like we have a number of folks asking how to contact us, or if the slides are going to be available. It's going to be posted on our website, so you can definitely check it out there at redfishtech.com. You will have Joanna's email as well as mine. If you have any additional questions that you weren't able to ask now or get answered now, feel free to reach out to us directly. We hope you valued the information we share with you today. We look forward to hearing from all the folks that have joined the webinar, and hopefully help you fill some roles and take that off your plate for you.
All right, thanks again, guys. Stay tuned for more webinars, and we look forward to working with you in the future.
The